guess we'll start with the housekeeping. How's Kyle coming along, and anyone else who might be banged up across you?
So, we're actually in a really good spot. Kyle, I told you he won't play this week. My guess is still kind of week to week here as we go closer and started at least back on the field doing some things. So I feel really good about that. The one tough deal, we lost Tez. Tez is going to be out for the year. So that's a situation that, really stinks for the kid. But, man, just how he's handled it has been uber impressive and, a great human. And he'll be back ready to rock and roll, next year. And then everybody else is good to go. So we should be in a great spot.
At that corner spot, I know Coffey's been banged up, but Quentin Taylor, Benny, how does that, early in the process, but how does that rotation look like? Because I know you feel good about the depth in that secondary.
Boy, we do. I think that's just the reality of it is, like, you're going to have injuries and the next guy's got to step up. Quentin Taylor's played, I think, almost 30 snaps a game the last 3 weeks and played really good football for us. Benny started to do a great job. We do get David Coffey back, so, David practiced today. So, I think we feel really confident about what that group looks like. And, I know those guys aren't participating, but their leadership is critical, and they've already done an unbelievable job. Coop had surgery and was out on the practice field today, and Tez is out there, so we'll be just fine.
Matt, where has Cincinnati improved since you saw him last year?
Yeah, I would just say, as I look at this Cincinnati team compared to, maybe what we played, it's the most complete team that we're going to play this year. And led by, I would tell you, an elite quarterback. Their quarterback is as good as I think we have faced. And, he's really talented. His ability to use his feet and run in some critical moments, and his ability to command the offense is uber impressive. And I think you've seen it. They've scored points in all their games and playing great football. And then, again, I think what Tyson's done defensively, that group, they're confident, they're tough, they're physical, they run to the football. And then on special teams, really all core 4 units, they're playing great football. So you're talking about the most complete football team we've played, playing great confidence. What a win last week for those guys in terms of how they played, winning on the road. And, I just think you got a really confident, complete football team, and what a test for us, to be quite honest with you.
I know part of the reason, Cooper got moved to the outside corner and Williams outside corner is the communication aspect of it. What's kind of lost or has to be made up from a leadership communication standpoint?
I don't think much, because I think the reality of it is we were worried about that early, and I think that so many of those guys have had to play, and I think that's probably the greatest gift is those guys, man, how to practice, how to communicate, what that looks like. Tez and Cooper on the field at times together, but hardly were they on the field at the same time together. We tried to keep one in with the other, and I think the great thing is you've seen the elevation. Those guys are playing such good football, and so, what Trey's done has been awesome. I think what Quentin Taylor's done has been awesome, and I think those guys are really ready for their moment. So the beauty is you've had some guys kind of help lead those guys through fall camp and through the early part of the season, and I think those guys are ready to go.
I think Boniface won that center job. What did you see then, and what have you seen now through 5 games?
That, and I'll be honest with you, I think it was kind of like we really didn't know going into Kansas State, to be honest with you, exactly where we were. And, probably Trev's situation solidified the start of the season. But what Jim has done has been remarkable. I know I said this before the season when Jim took over into that K-State game is, Jim put on 20 pounds between the end of last football season and then where he was, as the start of this football season. I think I always say this. I remember recruiting Jim and calling his high school football coach, and when we were in the decision of are we going to offer this guy or not, and his high school football coach said, "I guarantee you, by the time he becomes a senior, this guy's going to be one of the best leaders in your locker room." And boy, was he right. His leadership, his toughness. Jim is a uber intelligent human, but he is one of those guys that, to be replaced, not start last year, that's really tough. And I don't care who you are, what circumstance, and how he handled it, how his ability to respond to that adversity and get better. It's been probably one of the great stories on our football team. I think if you ask all of our kids in our program who they respect, they're going to tell you Jim Boniface, just how he handled it, how he came back better, and he's played really good football for us. And we'll need him to continue to do that, but his leadership, his ability to diagnose what's going on, to get all 5 guys going in the right direction, Jim does it at a really special rate.
You mentioned losing that starting job. He's not alone on this team or historically for you guys on that offensive line to lose a job after multiple years and then either come back or not. I guess what's the dynamic or the competition within that room that doesn't seem like a lot of jobs are safe?
Yeah, I think, and I would tell you a little bit globally, just in our team right now. I think you got that at some other places, linebacker, and I think number one is hopefully selflessness. Like I think we talk about that so much in our football program, and those are hard to, let alone being the player, those are hard decisions to make too, because I think we care about all of our guys in our football program. And I think anytime you make a decision, not to know if you're right or not, and we're not always right, believe me, but I think you're always trying to do what's best for the team in that moment. And I think to me, then for the human that it's happening to, how do you respond to this? I think equally it's our job then as the coaches to say, hey, here's why this is happening. You can either accept it, or we can work through this and figure out how to get you back to where you want to be. And I think we've always tried to do a really good job of communicating through that. And so, I think you look at James's situation, you look at Jim's situation, I think you look at Carson Willich's situation, and you see what's happened there. I think Kale's kind of going through that right now a little bit. Will McLaughlin at times has gone through that because of injury and some other things. And, our kids, I think that's the one thing I really love about this team, no matter what they're personally going through, the ability to come back for the betterment of the team, be a great teammate, work through their own situation, and then, come back better when they have the opportunity to respond to it. And that's certainly been a fabric of our football team.
How does that, I guess, on one hand, how does that situation complicated, or how do you keep it from being complicated on the other hand with the transfer portal where a guy loses a job? I mean, it's easiest thing to do is go get a job somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the biggest thing, the only way I know how to handle any of those situations is absolute honesty. And, number one, I think we have to look ourselves in the mirror at night. And number two, I think the reminder for me, it's interesting as my own children are getting older, man, how would you treat your own child going through this situation? And I think any time that you go through adversity, you would love to have complete transparency and honesty of what's going on in the situation, and then help that person work through the adversity, whether it's here or they decide to go somewhere else. Those are their options, but we have to do a great job of understanding, man, these are 18 to 22-year-olds, and there are going to be good days, there are going to be tough days, there are going to be tough moments, and, I think we're all defined and continue to pound away is, man, when tough times come, how do we respond really is defining the character of a human and a football team for sure.
It was fun to see Ben get that deep pass the other night. Just what was your perspective on that, and just overall in his few years here in Ames, what have you seen from him to make him the player he is?
Yeah, Ben's really special football player, and I think what makes Ben really unique is he is a great football player. Ben probably could play wide receiver, running back, probably could play quarterback if you needed him to, just because he's one of those guys that, he grew up with a father as a head football coach. This guy played 4 sports, so he was always playing sports growing up. And so I think we knew when we got Ben, you were getting somebody that A, loved football, that B, really had this unique athletic ability that could do so many different things for your football team. What doesn't get talked about, probably Ben's best blocking game in the game was Saturday. And, I think it's just a credit to him because he's really improved as a tight end, as well as all the unique things he can do for us offensively. And that play is unique in its own right. The main target is covered. So that's like option like C. Like we didn't even practice it that way, And so, when he made the play, I just said on the headset, man, this guy's a football guy. He's got a great worldly knowledge of what's going on, and he's got great vision. So we're grateful to have him. Really proud of his growth for sure.
Maybe this is a question for the off-season here, but the injuries in the secondary this year, linebacker last year, you brought in Joe Resendez, seemed to have done a pretty good job over this last off-season. Do you think that maybe the rules need to change a little bit, like from the NCAA where the off-season, you do more, you do less?
No.
Spring?
I think what happened this year is totally fluky. So, I think some of the things that maybe happened in the past are unique. I think when you talk 2 ACL injuries, you're talking, man, that's football. And football is going to happen. And so, no, I don't think the rules will change. I think the world wants everything to change. And you can take away toughness from football players, and that would be a major mistake. But let's hope they don't change so we can still teach football and learn how to play the sport of football.
How does Willick complement Bacon and Ebel, and what has his return meant for the linebacker room?
Boy, I think, And the other name that you got to know in there is John Klosterman, because he doesn't get enough credit on our football team. Man, John is like, John and Carson bring an edge to our football team that is right. They love football. Their mental toughness and their ability to spark our football team and kind of bring a sense of toughness to our team is huge. And I think even gaining those guys back last weekend, that was huge for us and huge for our team. And, I do think it's big for Coop, to be sitting in the middle and know you got guys on both edges of you that you have absolute faith and trust in. And, Coop played his best game of the season, on Saturday, which I was really proud of. And I think he's only going to keep playing good football. But I just think for us, there are so many veterans in that linebacker room. And again, you talk about communication, you talk about, the ability to get everybody aligned. It really starts at linebacker. And when that room's healthy, I feel like we have great communication on defense. And I think, that's what the veteranness of John and having Carson in the football game with Bake and Zach on the other side, I think those are huge things for us.
And just double checking, what is John Tez's injury and what is the status for Kaijan and Rocco?
Yeah, both guys will be available. The situation on Tez is ACL.
Matt, I know you talked about Chase so well after the game, breakout game, but kind of unique background for him with the baseball and his dad. Does that translate? And then also his journey. You talk a lot about people's stories being told. I mean, he starts at Colorado, tell him to take a hike, and he goes to East Carolina, has a lot of options and comes here. Can you just reflect a little bit on his journey and that background?
Yeah, and honestly, nobody's talking about Chase's mom, who was like an elite soccer player at the University of Florida. His dad will get mad, but I think Chase's mom is probably, bar none, the best athlete in the family. And so, I just think there's a great, first of all, humility from the family. I mean, I really enjoy Chase's mom and dad. They were looking for what was right, not what was most. And I really appreciate that. And, like I said, I think you're always defined by adversity. And I think it was adverse the first 3 or 4 weeks. Chase is prideful, and, it stinks to have to work through some injuries, which he had to do. And, we all want instant gratification, and you didn't get it. And I think the thing that was really rewarding was, I think, the support that he got from home, the support that, he sunk into with our coaching staff to kind of work through, maybe a slow early start for him. And I think all those things come from a great foundation, and what he has at home is a great foundation, and we're really grateful for that. And, Chase's brother is here as well, Hunter is on our team, and, to have both of them here, I mean, Hunter, I think, got named Scout Team Player of the Week last week, for that game. So to see both of those young men, and to have both of their spirits, their work ethic, I think it says a lot about mom and dad. And you're right, he's got great baseball background. We had a softball tournament to start back here in May, and he was pretty impressive. You probably would have said MVP status. His catching great, hitting probably can still, maybe that he can still work on that a little bit, but I thought his ability to play center field was pretty impressive.
Coach, year 2 against Tyson Veit. What have you learned going up against someone who was in your program for so long?
Yeah, I think it's never, you don't love it just because you love the human and you love the people. And, both Tyson and Scott are guys that, their families, our families, we love those people and we believe in them. And, the reality is we also know they're not just great humans, they're great football coaches. And I think anytime you have so much respect for the person across from you, the competitive environment is always tough. But, that's our sport. That's kind of how it rolls. And, at the end of the day, what they're doing is such a credit to who they are as men and leaders. And it's really exciting to watch what they're doing. But that doesn't have any impact really on what we're doing. And what we have to do is really be the best version of us as we kind of prepare ourselves for Saturday, and which would be a great football environment. But I think when you step away from it, the respect and appreciation and gratitude that you have for who those guys are and what those guys are about. Those guys had a huge impact on me as a football coach. Certainly had an impact on our football program, and I would say they both have, because Scott was as good of a mentor to me as a young football coach as maybe anybody in our profession. How do you live? How do you treat your family through this journey? Man, how do you raise your kids? And then, Tyson, I would say the same way. I mean, Tyson's impact at Toledo to Tyson's impact here, we would be nowhere close without what he has meant to myself and our football team. So respect and gratitude, and then obviously, it makes it tough when you're competing against them. But, once the game's over with, you go back to the respect and love that you have for them for sure.
Hey, Coach. Will Jontez Williams and then Jeremiah Cooper still travel?
Yeah, I don't know if we know that yet.
Okay, I was just wondering. And then who do you see filling their spots? Do you have an idea of who you
Yeah, who's kind of filled in? Quentin Taylor and Trey have both played a ton of football, and so I don't even know if it's fill in. I think they just continue to play more, and Trey played awesome last week, and, Quentin's, like I said, played a ton of football, and, I think Benny Nagoye is a guy that just keeps impressing across the board. So I think we feel like there's certainly the players to be ready to go, and again, football happens, and the next guy's got to be ready to go play.
I think on 2 occasions you've called the timeout at the end of the first quarter ahead of a punt. What's the strategy there?
Yeah, last Saturday, was I wanted them to punt out of our student section end zone, to be honest with you. And, I really felt like there wasn't a ton of wind. At Iowa, there was a ton of wind. And I wanted them to punt into the wind. And I thought it was a huge factor in it. Probably right. Still don't know if the decision was right or whatever happened in that play. But, thought we would have got the ball in really good field position. And I think it kind of proved right. It's always risky because I like to keep those timeouts usually, for a 2-minute situation at the end of a half. But, I just felt like the weather, the environment, I thought it was the right opportunity to try to gain the most field position. And uniquely we did. But, obviously that was the mindset around it. Whether that's a right call or not, that was my thinking.
Do you, I guess, the weather specifically, is that something you go into a game saying, if we're in this situation, I'm going to do it? You don't have to.
I don't know. I think sometimes you don't even know until you get out there, and then at our place, shoot, it changes by the minute. So, I do think you're thinking about those things as the game's going. And, at least how we start the game, we're always talking about, are we going into the wind? Are we kicking into the wind? What's that look like? Because I think, man, whoever you put out there to start the game needs to know what are the elements against them, and so we'll talk about that. But I think those decisions are a little bit a spur of the moment because I think you're just trying to figure out what's the edge, and it's unique that both of those have happened early in the season, and that was the thinking behind it, though.
Take one more here in the middle.
One thing that you said earlier in this press conference stuck with me. You said when thinking about the transfer portal and conversations with players, you think about how would you want your own kids treated. How often do you ask yourself that question when communicating with players on your own team or even high school recruits?
Yeah, I think about it a lot. I think the reality is probably one of the great gifts for me is I've been in their seat. I've lived this journey and, good days and tough days. And I think back to my own journey, how would I wanted to be treated, and then, now I got a daughter that's going through recruiting right now on the other side of it, and it's like, I think it always gives you a great perspective of like, what are these parents and what are these players going through? Again, I know we've tried to create pro sports, but these are 18 to 22-year-old kids who have moved away from home for the first time. They're going through all of this journey, let alone, I think, the magnitude of the environment that surrounds them. And I think we have to do a great job of like understanding what our role is. Yes, it's to coach. Yes, it's to put our team in great position to be successful. But before any of that, we have to be great mentors to these young people, and we have to help guide them through life's journey. So I think I feel like that's my responsibility. It's what I still love most about my job, and the reality of it, I feel like that's priority number one in our football program.
Totally different line of questioning. One thing I've noticed about the way your staff recruits is you're often the first scholarship offer for a lot of high school players. Is that something that you and your staff prioritize? And if so, why is that something that's valuable?
I don't know if it's a priority. I feel like what I do feel is a priority is to recruit and not to look at everybody else's recruiting and then decide who we're recruiting. That's one. Number two, I think we like to recruit. Hoosh does an unbelievable job. Our staff off the field does an incredible job. And I think the thing for me is there's at least enough trust now being at one place 10 years, knowing what our system is offensively and defensively. I think knowing who we are and what this place is, that we pretty much have a really good feel if a young person and his family fit what we're about. And I think that what's allowed us to be is very confident when we offer somebody to say, you know what, we're offering the right human, the right person, it's a great fit. So, I think that's allowed us, if it's to be aggressive, it's be aggressive, it's be early, but I think, for the most part, it's helped us be close to right, and you're never going to be 100% right in this, but you try to be as close as you possibly can. And again, a lot of credit to Derek, a lot of credit to our recruiting staff to do a lot of the legwork early on so we can make those really important decisions, and try to make them with pretty good speed.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.